The Trails of Cold Steel series begins a new arc in the Trails franchise called the Erebonia arc. This sees the protagonist Reen Schwarzer and his classmates called Class 7 enrolling in an Erebonian military academy called Thors. Trails of Cold Steel sets the tone and portrays Thors as if it were a traditional high school where romance can bloom and everyone is optimistic for their future. But as we all know, those halcyon days of youth don't last forever. The soundtrack of Trails of Cold Steel establishes and retains this lighthearted tone throughout, but quickly gets darker as the global conflict that's been developing since Trails in the Sky plummets Class 7 into the reality of their situation. This soundtrack, in my opinion, also boasts the most variety out of the series in terms of sound to reflect the diversity of the game's cast. Class 7 ranges from people that grew up anywhere from royalty to poverty to the bustling city to vast plains, and each of the songs throughout the soundtrack reflect their background. This soundtrack predominantly leans into the genre of rock music to channel the youth and rebelliousness of Class 7 and the new, younger player base of the series. Falcom and its community do a great job of crediting its composers, artists, and arrangers, so if there's a specific track you like, I'd encourage you to look into the composer's other work. Also, before we begin, there will be a playlist of all the songs that I list in this video, as well as other recommendations that I have, so definitely check that out as well. With that being said, here's some of the composers and arrangers for Trails of Cold Steel's soundtrack. My personal headcanon is that Elliot composed most of the songs throughout this game's soundtrack, but you don't have to subscribe to that if you don't want to. The opening track of Trails of Cold Steel encapsulates the sound of the original Legend of Heroes series, which hasn't been done since Trails in the Sky FC. The series has since gone the route of more anime opening sounds for their opening music. Trails of Cold Steel was designed as an entry point to bring new players into the series, so channeling the sound of the franchise's origins was a nice homage to the series' roots. The entirety of the soundtrack carries this blend of traditional and modern Falcom music composition, which showcases how talented and diverse the range of Falcom sound team's composers are. After school hours is played whenever Class 7 is let out of class for the day and allowed to spend free time on campus as they please. The song reflects the youthful, carefree nature of the students and sets the tone for the setting of the game. The Glen of Cold Steel serves as the battle theme of the series, and as usual, this track gets some gas. This high-energy trance track channels the triumphant, youthful energy that Class 7 brings to every single fight. And the sound design throughout this track is pretty interesting. I saw this in a YouTube comment, but there's a sound of a train whistle at 27 seconds, and this is a reference to the series' namesake, Cold Steel, which is referring to Erebonia's railway system, which is one of the major focuses throughout the game. Also, as another Easter egg, the leitmotif of the opening theme plays at about a minute 45 seconds into the track. And as you know, leitmotifs are very important throughout this whole franchise's soundtrack. Tiling of Arcus is the alternative battle theme of Trails of Cold Steel. The blend of violin, one of the most prominent and defining instruments throughout the series, and guitar reflects the design philosophy of the Trails of Cold Steel series that I mentioned earlier in bridging the gap between new and old players. The guitar is used throughout the soundtrack to channel that energy of rebelliousness and youth that Class 7 and new, younger players of the series carry. Game of Blades is the soundtrack for the card game of Trails of Cold Steel called Blade, and this is one of my favorite songs in Cold Steel 1. It's a good song. And here's a fun fact, Blade was originally featured in another Falcom franchise called Brandish, and similarly, the card game Vantage Master in the later games also comes up from a Falcom series of the same name. Land of Blue Skies plays when Class 7 visits the homeland of one of their foreign students, Gaius. This part of the game is many students' first time experiencing other cultures and locations, which I'd argue is a large part of the Cold Steel arc's thematic focus, which would be the convergence of different cultures and backgrounds into one location. The predominant use of wind instruments throughout the track reflects the vast and windy plain of the Nord Highlands. The night sky on that day plays when certain characters open up to Reen and each other about their past throughout the game. The song is a major tonal shift from the rest of the soundtrack's bubbly and optimistic music. This track is an omen for the rest of the series and goes to show that even the happiest people can't escape the consequences and tragedy of war. Into the Abyss brings back the mystical and ethereal sounds of Tros III as the party begins to stumble upon the supernatural secrets hidden within the shadows of Erebonia. Eliminate Crisis is the whimsical boss theme of Trails of Cold Steel and is an absolutely incredible track. I'd give up a lot to hear a live orchestrated performance of this similar to something like Distant Worlds. This track also uses a leitmotif from the opening of the game once again throughout the track to symbolize the bond that Class 7 has developed as a group. Wholehearted Feelings is used throughout the romance and bonding scenes throughout the game. This track uses a motif from the Whereabouts of Stars, which is a diegetic song from the Trails in the Sky trilogy, and that song is originally from Erebonia, so it makes sense for it to be interpolated here. Trails of Cold Steel 2 sees Reen and Class 7 being forcibly separated from each other after the events of Trails of Cold Steel. This soundtrack reflects the feeling of isolation, division, and struggle to overcome barriers and reunite as a class wonderfully. The lighthearted tone is faintly present throughout the soundtrack, but for the most part, it's completely different. Forward Relentlessly is the main menu theme of Trails of Cold Steel 2 and reflects the tonal shift between Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2. As the title suggests, this track encourages Class 7 to push forward despite everything they're faced against. Wintry Arrival plays as Reen attempts to navigate through the cold and desolate region of Ymir alone on the verge of freezing and starving to death. This is one of the first times he has to truly fight without Class 7, and that feeling of defeat and isolation is expressed throughout this track perfectly. Just like the previous theme, Ymir Canyon represents the isolation that Reen feels as he continues his journey throughout Erebonia through the icy region of Ymir. The progression throughout this track blows my mind. There's so many layers being added throughout this track, and it just manages to loop upon itself by the end. It's really great. I'm repeating myself, but once again, this track represents Reen's isolation. With this track in particular, there's a lot of what I describe as empty space, which gives the feeling of being alone on a vast, empty road. This uses a lot of wind instruments, chimes, and string instruments to amplify this tone. Awakening uses the menu theme Forward Relentlessly and turns an originally somber song into a triumphant battle theme. This track is also considered to be Valamar's theme. Transcend Beat is another techno track related to Valamar. This track also contains a callback to the track Silver Will from Trails in the Sky. To the Irreplaceable People plays as Class 7 slowly reunites over the course of the game and deepens their bonds together. I consider this track to be the culmination of the game's entire theme. For Those We Hold Dear, For Those We Love plays in a scene where all of Class 7 members are finally fully able to emotionally process what they've gone through together as military students. Blue Destination, one of the hardest tracks in the series, and if you haven't played Trails before, this is most likely one of the songs you've probably heard from it, aside from Sophisticated Fight. This is an arrangement of the Decisive Collision, and in my opinion, the best one. Decisive Collision is Crow's theme, is a recurring track that's remixed throughout the Trails of Cold Steel series. When I think of Trails of Cold Steel, I think of this song or its many renditions. As much as I love the classical and jazzy soundtracks of the previous Trails games, I love that the Trails of Cold Steel series is able to nail the more contemporary songs and genres such as trance, because this is just a straight up dance track, and it's also very emotional at the same time too, which is a balance that's difficult to pull off tonally. Phantasmal Blaze is the final dungeon theme of Trails of Cold Steel 2. This track pushes that triumphant energy that was present throughout Trails of Cold Steel 1 soundtrack, and also uses Heimdallr's theme as a motif, which in itself uses a motif from the final choice from Trails 3, which, if you know anything about the series, kinda comes back around full circle, which I think is really cool. To a Glimmering Tomorrow is the final boss theme of Trails of Cold Steel 2. It uses leitmotifs from other tracks such as To the Replaceable People throughout. The use of these melodies gives a triumphant feel and a feeling of melancholy and longing, as the road to victory can't change what's been lost. I'll Remember You is such a huge punch in the gut and serves as the ending theme for Trails of Cold Steel 2. Staying consistent with the rest of Crow's theme, this track uses the motif of the Decisive Collision once again. And with that, we're done with Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2, but we're not done with the entire Trails of Cold Steel series. Trails of Cold Steel 3 and 4 take a different direction with the music, which is why I wanted to separate the videos, so look forward to that. But until then, let me know what your favorite song of the series has been so far. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, whatever you feel like, and I'll see you in the next video. Until next time.